Ladies, gentlemen, and self-driving cars, welcome to ReadWriteMix. Tonight, woo! Go ahead. Woo! Woo! Tonight, I'm very pleased to have a special guest to help us map the app economy. Dennis Crowley of Foursquare.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good to see you. Can I sit?
Please,
Okay.
please.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to ruin your intro by rushing on the stage.
No. Take the stage. I'm used to people rushing the stage when we do these things. It's just, it kind of comes with the territory.
All right. These chairs are pretty laid back.
I know. We can
Really
just
comfortable.
ease back, relax. I find I kind of lean forward because I get into the conversations.
I will lean forward then.
So, Dennis, you and I have known each other, ran around each other in the industry for a while now. I'm going to confess, I've gotten more and more obsessed with Foursquare as a user over the years. It's kind of gotten worse. It's something I'm considering getting therapy about. A lot of people have, I would say, have a different relationship with Foursquare. It's something they've heard of. They don't quite know how it fits in their life.
Yeah.
So what's your pitch to people? What is Foursquare today?
Okay. Well, I mean, it's interesting because it's like an interesting time because the pitch is starting to evolve. And I think a lot of you guys in this room you're probably aware of like what we've been doing with the unbundling and the creation of these two apps. So we have our Swarm app and we have our Foursquare app. But one of the reasons that we did that is because I think the story and the one-line pitch for why should you use Foursquare, why should you care, why should you be using it regularly, why should your friends be using it, I think it got complicated over the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm assuming there's a lot of Foursquare users here, yes? Right? And so, okay, great, thank you.
Who has actually checked in?
Thank you. But I'm assuming that there's, people check in for a wide variety of reasons, like to remember where they went, to share with their friends, to find where their friends have been, to make Foursquare smarter, to make the recommendations personalized. And like that story, I think, worked for a certain subset of users for the first 4 or 5 years of the company. But now that we have 50 million people that have signed up for Foursquare, we're trying to tell the story to a larger audience, trying to get it to appeal to a larger audience. Like we start to understand that there's some natural tension in the story between there's 2 parts. Number 1, check in, your friends can find you, and then those check-ins make your search and recommendations a little bit better. And I think we were confusing some users with that story, which is why we decided to ultimately unbundle the app. And we did this after talking to a lot of users and really listening to a lot of user feedback. And we can observe through a lot of just looking at our logs, we can understand the way that people are using the app, and we can see that there's a bunch of people that would use it to check in all the time, and then they would check in, then close the app, and then maybe an hour later they would open it back up again, and they would search for something and they would close it, and then they'd open it back up and search, and then check in somewhere else. And so we thought, gosh, if we could just make these 2 super simple apps and tell a very clear story around the 2 of them. Swarm being, hey, it's the best, fastest, easiest way to keep up and meet up with friends. And Foursquare being the best, fastest, easiest way to get personalized local search recommendations, then we'd be in a much better position. And so that's a lot of the stuff that we've been working on, I think a lot of the stuff that you've been reading, and a lot of the stuff that you've been seeing in the app. And so the Swarm app came out a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, and the new Foursquare app is something that we're working pretty hard on right now.
Right on. So just to back up a second, I realize we've got a lot of people who are very familiar with Foursquare here.
Sure.
But the check-in, I think of it as this really interesting gesture where you say, I am here, and I'm here and I want you to know.
Yep.
By taking that out of Foursquare and making Foursquare a place where you just kind of find things on a map,
yep.
Are you losing that kind of special element that's defined Foursquare for years?
Well, I think if you got 10 people on the stage and asked them why do they check into places, you would get a bunch of those reasons. Yeah, I check in to tell people where I'm at. And then there's also people that would say, I check in just to keep a record of where I've been. And then you get people that are I check in because I want Foursquare to get smarter. I want Foursquare to learn about me. And that's been kind of the story of the product since we first started. We have a variety of use cases. One of the things we think a lot about now is what does a version of Foursquare look like that never had a check-in button, that didn't require you to check in? Like, what if we could make a version of Foursquare that just learned about the places that you've been to just by going to those places? Like, if you stop inside of a coffee shop for 10 minutes, we can understand that. If you go to the same sandwich shop 3 times a week, we can understand that without having to open the app, without having to hit a button. And this is stuff that we've been thinking about for a long time. And it's really what we've wanted to do. If you even go back to the Dodgeball days, like, how do you make these systems?
Dodgeball was your first company that you sold to Google.
Yeah, first company got sold to Google in 2005, and we were there for about 2 years. But even then, it's like, how do you make these systems that learn about the things you do in the real world, like the places you go, the people that you hang out with? And then how can you use that data to make it easier to meet up with your friends and make it easier to discover like awesome places to go to? And like, we're still doing that. Like, the mission of the company is the same. The questions and the problems we're trying to solve are the same. We're just getting much more sophisticated at being able to do it. And a lot of the things we can start to do just by kind of understanding the way that phones move through space and understanding what the sensors are ending up reporting back to Foursquare.
So how is Swarm doing? Do you have any numbers to report on downloads?
Yeah, I think it's too early to share some of the numbers. Like, we remember, because it's kind of like, we just launched the thing about 4 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I really don't think the Swarm story is complete until we launch the new Foursquare app. And when we talk to a lot of users, like, they love the fact that I think the check-in got easier and lighter and simpler with Swarm. And also, I think like the things that we're doing with neighborhood sharing are really interesting, and it makes the whole Foursquare, like the whole finding friends part of the Foursquare story more accessible to people through the Swarm app, which is great. But I want to get the new Foursquare app out before we start evaluating like the success of both of those products, because it really is. It's like it's the two things together that the company is really excited about. And we launched Swarm early because there's a lot of work to do with it. There's a lot of education to be done. We want to see how people are using it and responding to it. But I think once you have those two apps side by side running on your phone, like, that's where it starts to unlock some really interesting possibilities.
So 3 things have happened to me that kind of have made me rethink what's going on with Foursquare, at least in my usage. I got a Pebble watch. I'm not wearing it today because I've already got 2 wearables, and I've decided to cap it at 2 to spare my wrist. Otherwise, I'll get way down. But I've been playing with the Pebble watch. I've gotten the Swarm app, and Facebook has switched Instagram over, at least in my version of the app, to its Facebook Places database.
Yep.
All of these things have made me realize that your database is really fast and scarily accurate, because on the Pebble watch and on the Swarm app, it's like one shot. You have to get the right place immediately, or it's really cumbersome to change it.
Yeah.
And in the old Foursquare app, you would kind of always choose from a list of places. Usually the right one was at the top. You've kind of made a bet on the accuracy of your database. And in this new environment of a wearable, it seems to be paying off.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm a big Instagram user. It happens, I take a photo at a park every day. Same park. It's not on
Same photo?
Same photo.
Same photo.
Actually,
okay.
If anyone follows me on Twitter, you know the one that you know the one that Dennis is talking about. This neighborhood park where I walk my dog. The venue's not in Facebook Places, so I have to go through this cumbersome process of trying to find it. And that's kind of made me realize what life looks like without Foursquare. You've talked about being the quote unquote location layer of the internet. What does that mean?
Well, there's a bunch of stuff in there. Even since like the very early days of Foursquare, where we started with a venue database that had like 0 places in it, and this is back in around my kitchen table in 2009. And over time, we had our 50 million people fill out this database with around 60 million places, and it's a really interesting data set because it's not all the places you would find in the yellow pages. It's every classroom at NYU. It's like every taco stand on a beach in Venice. It's like just the places that no one else really knows about, but Foursquare knows about because Foursquare users tell us about the places that are important to them. And so over time, this data set turned, actually from the very early days, it just turned into like a really interesting, ever-evolving data set, like a Wikipedia for places that was owned by the community and managed by the community. The community goes in and opens up new places and closes them down and merges them together and fixes the phone number and moves a place across the street. That's a really amazing data set. And we have a community of super users, tens of thousands of them, that all around the world, they're curating and changing this database on our behalf, which is awesome. And database wouldn't be as great as it is without them. And since the very early days, it's been like, hey, we have this amazing data asset. We should make it available to people. We should make it available through the API. Like the API was one of the first things that we built, even before we raised funding back in 2009, because we knew our place data set was better than, at the time, it was the Google one, better than the Yahoo one, better than the Yelp one, even back then. And we knew it's like we should give this to people, and we should give them the ability to say, I need a lat long, and a user ID, and we'll give anyone that asks personalized, local search results off of it. And so that's been, a big part of the company since 2009, and a big part of the story since 2009, and I think something that's kind of anchored the engineering culture and the development community as well. So like we're really proud of that, and I think I'm honored that I think it's about over 65,000 developers are using our Places API, which it's everyone from your Pinterest to your Uber to your Flickrs to there's like Waze is using it. There's like a lot of the marquee apps are using it in a certain way, which is great.
So one of those is Instagram.
Was Instagram, yeah.
Was Instagram. I feel like they're actually still using you in a sneaky way. I think when they can't find something in Facebook Places, they back up to you.
Oh, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that yet. But like we've seen that they've been able to switch over. We see it because users complain to us. They're like, hey, the Foursquare data got really lousy all of a sudden. I'm like, it's not us. Like they switched over to Facebook. Like go talk to Facebook about it. And
that's kind of hard because actually, like you and Instagram have trained them that the places in Instagram come from Foursquare.
Well, yeah, at the bottom used to say powered by Foursquare, and unless you're really looking for it, you don't see it. So I mean, we get complaints all the time from people about it, and I'm like, hey, there's not much we can do about it. Go talk to those guys about it.
Instagram very famously sold for $1 billion at the time.
Uh-huh.
People said a big value is that they could attach photos to places. Do you feel like they built that $1 billion on your back?
Oh, no. I mean, Instagram is awesome for a wide variety of reasons. One of which it was like growing like a weed, like the iOS app and the Android app. And I think, if anything, they were probably challenging Facebook's superiority or dominance in photos. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that they were so attractive to Facebook. I think that the having geotagged photos is really interesting. I don't think it's like the main tenet there. But then, I look at like the way that we're powering, we're powering Flickr's geotagged photos. Mm-hmm. Like we have, I think we have almost 50 million photos in our database. I'd have to double check that number. But there's a lot of photos that we have that we've gotten from users. It's like we have people that are adding to our data set every day, both through the Foursquare app, through the Swarm app, and through all the 65,000 other apps that are either sending us a lot of data or just a little bit of data every single day.
Are you feeling, do you feel anything missing from your data without Instagram? Has that kind of affected the flow?
Yeah, it hasn't been a huge deal for us. Like the thing that's most important with the data set is that our data set gets better depending on the places that folks are checking into. And we're consistently getting millions of check-ins per day, which is fantastic, and that reinforces. That's new signal every single day that tells us like, yes, this coffee shop is still here, and this coffee shop is still popular, but this one across the street is growing in popularity. 6 million check-ins a day tells you a lot about what's going on in the world, especially when you look at that over the course of like 90 days or so. And in addition, I don't know if you've seen this in the app, but occasionally we ask people questions right after they check in. Like, hey, you just checked in at this coffee shop. Do they take MasterCard? Do they take Visa? Is it dog friendly? Would you take a date here? Would you come back here again? Is the coffee good? Like we ask people questions about the places that they go to. And it's turning out to be a really incredibly powerful thing where we can say like, hey, we don't have any information about which places are dog friendly in the mission. So we can go and launch, you could go launch a question on Foursquare that's like, after anyone checks in at any bar in the mission, ask them whether the place is dog friendly or not. And after an hour, you have 1,000 responses, and suddenly there's your map of places. And like that's a really, really powerful thing that we can do that I don't think any other company can do. And we're starting to do a lot more of that to basically fill in any holes that we might have in some of our data sets.
You've started to actually make money off your data. You had a deal recently with Microsoft. You also...
You say that like it's a bad thing. Like, how dare you? How dare your company make some money?
No, it's, like for a long time you were really giving the data, access to your API away for free. There weren't.
Yeah, well, we still do. We still do, but like there's, when there's an opportunity, like I'm assuming you're talking about the Microsoft thing, Microsoft partnership that we did in December. Microsoft is like, you guys are doing you have an amazing data set. You guys are doing amazing things in your app. We are about to launch some amazing things on Windows Phone, and we think they would be a lot better if they could be powered by some of the Foursquare signal. And we look at that as like, hey, we can totally help you with this. It's a great opportunity for us as a company. It's a huge stage for us to perform on, like being able to improve the OS level on a lot of these devices, and it generates revenue for the company. So we think that stuff is fantastic.
And you recently told me there are actually 6 ways that Foursquare makes money.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the data licensing, which is essentially a deal like Microsoft. What are the other 5 ways?
Well, we have 4 different ad products, and then we have data licensing, like the Microsoft deal, and we have merchant claims, right? So if you own a taco shop and you come to Foursquare, we'll charge you $20 or so to go and claim your venue on Foursquare. And it turns out that, with a lot of people claiming, that turned out to be a significant revenue source, which is great for us.
And is one product like the bulk of your revenues?
No,
or how's it divided up?
What's interesting for us, like remember the company's only, people think that it's funny, people think we're like a 500-person company that's been around for 8 years. But we're like 160 people, and we've been around just over 5 years. But remember, it took us about a year to even get the thing started. But for a company in our stage, 5 years at 160 people, we have a really mature monetization model. We've got these 6 different 6 different revenue streams. All of them are performing like equally well, which is great for us. And the advertising products are working out fantastically for us. Like they fit in the app, they fit very natively. People seem to love the ads. They help brands, they help local merchants. Like we feel really satisfied with the way a lot of that's been going.
And are you profitable now?
Company's not profitable yet, but like we can see how that happens in the future. I think I don't know how many folks in here are entrepreneurs, but generally when you start these things, you're like, oh, we'll figure out how to make money later. And then you go a couple years before you're like, I think I know how this thing is going to generate some revenue. And then you get to that stage where it's like, actually, we're generating some revenue and we feel pretty good about it. And then you get to that point where it's like, if we continue doing this and we continue growing the way that we are, and the revenue continues growing the way that it is, we can see how this thing turns into like a really interesting, profitable, big, growing, scaling company. Like we're in that stage. We're in that stage right now. If you look at our revenue from 2012 to 2013, it was up 600%. Right? If you look at what we did Q2 last year to Q2 this year, it's up 300%. We're going to make in the first 2 quarters of this year, we'll make more money than we did all of last year. Like those are the signals that you look for from like your monetization team and the chief revenue officer that we have, Steven. And when he tells you those things, it's like, all right, this thing is working. It's working really well. It's growing very nicely, and that's where it starts to feel really satisfying.
You have gotten, you talk about being a relatively young company, but you have kind of gotten to that point where some of the soldiers drop off the march, as it were.
It's an interesting way to put it. Yeah. No, I think it's. Go ahead.
I think your longtime COO recently left. You hired a new COO.
We have a new COO that's starting about 2 weeks or so. Jeff Click, who's amazing, and Evan, who I've been working with for since the beginning of Foursquare, and I knew him long before that.
Evan Cohen.
Evan Cohen, yeah. And this is like a natural thing that happens to companies. And I think any time that we have someone leave, everyone's like, oh my gosh, someone's leaving. I'm like, hey, this is what happens.
Yeah, that's our job as reporters.
I know. It's just like a natural thing. It's like people go and they give it their all for their like 3, 4, 5 years. And they're like, I'm going to take a break. I think I realized that like these are the things I like working on. These are the problems. This is the scale I like solving. And this happens to all companies. So like, Evan did a fantastic job. We would not be where we were without Evan's help. And Jeff is super excited to come in, and like he's incredibly talented, incredibly experienced executive, and I think he's going to take us to great places.
So when I mentioned that, when I mentioned to people that that I'm going to be here interviewing you, the question came up. Oh yeah, Foursquare. You know, I haven't used that in years. Is that still a thing? So, is Foursquare still a thing? How are you going to convince those people who think it's not a thing?
I hear that all the time. You know, you're not going to hurt my feelings here at all. There's been plenty of opportunities to hurt my feelings over the last like 5 years.
It's impossible.
I think the people of there's a critical mass of people, maybe even people in this room, not critical mass, but there's a number of people that I think are over the idea of checking in everywhere that they go. Like, really, you want me to take my phone out of my pocket every single time I go to a coffee shop and press the I am here button? Like, I'm not doing that anymore. And I totally understand that. Like, I always look at, what we were doing, what we're doing with Foursquare, and I'm like, how did we get to the point where we get 50 million people that are doing that on a regular basis? Now remember, the big idea behind Foursquare was not to make an awesome check-in button, right? Like, if that was the goal, like we did that, we can all go home. Like, the goal is to make welcome.
I guess Ramona's checking in.
Yes.
Just decided she needed to be up here.
Now, well, the goal with Foursquare was always that's great. The goal was
getting
Foursquare,
good.
What's that? That's a good sign. Yeah. She's like, this is Ramona, right?
Yes, Ramona.
Like, this is a really good conversation. I want to be a little closer. I want to be closer to the action. Yeah. No, but like the point of Foursquare was, like, how do you build software that makes cities easier to use? Like, how do you make a piece of software that learns about the places that you go to, the people that you overlap with? It makes it easier to find great places. It makes it easier to meet up with your friends. Like, that's been what we've been trying to do since NYU. That's what we tried to do at Dodgeball. That's why we started Foursquare. And the only way to make this stuff happen in 2005 with Dodgeball was to ask people to check in via SMS. And the only way to do it in 2009 was to ask people to hit a check-in button. And like, that's just the state of the world. And now I actually thought that by the time like 2011 rolled around, that we'd be past that point, that like, oh, the phones will just know where they are. We'll get some magic API from Apple that will just tell you where the device is at any time. Like, even in 2014, those things don't exist. Like, the only way that we're able to do a lot of the stuff that we can do, and this includes the smart stuff you were talking about, your Pebble Watch knows exactly the name of the place you're at.
Yeah.
Like, when you hit the check-in button at Swarm, it like knows with a high degree of certainty the name of the place that you happen to be in. Like, that stuff, that's really, really hard to do. And we're one of the only companies, I think we are the only company that can do that, because we have so much data about what's going on in the world, where people have been, what the shapes of places look like. And so that's one of the reasons that we have the luxury now of saying, like, that old Foursquare model of like you have to check in everywhere you go? Let's blow that up. Let's change that. Let's make a version of Foursquare that gives you personalized recommendations without you ever having to hit a check-in button. Let's give you a version of Swarm that lets you know where your friends are without them having to hit the check-in button. Like, just this neighborhood awareness with very low power consumption. That stuff is very, very difficult to do. And the reason that our company can do it is because we've been trying to solve these problems for 5 years now. And like, we've been trying to solve this particular thing since like 2011. We've gotten really, really good at it. And so the only reason, like, when you talk about, like, the stuff that I love the most about what we're doing, and I don't know if you guys have gotten these Foursquare alerts, is like, you can walk into a restaurant and put your phone on the table, and like 5 minutes later, Foursquare will ping you and be like, oh, you're at Ryoko Sushi? Like, the best thing to do is order this thing off the chef's special menu. Like, it identifies where you are, it identifies you haven't been here, it finds a tip from a friend that's been there recently, and it lets you know about that tip. Like,
and it sort of knows that you're sitting down and not moving.
It knows that you stop. Like, that's how a lot of the stuff works. Is like trying to do this, do the stop detection, and then be able to detect, like, okay, now that you've stopped, where do we think you are? That's the stuff that is like, that's really, really powerful. That's what I think the future of local search and discovery looks like. Like the future of like walking around with wearables and a lot of these connected devices. And the reason that you don't see like Facebook and Google rolling stuff out like that is like, I don't think they can do that yet. I think we're one of the only companies that can do it because of the data set that we have. And I think that's one of the most amazing things about Foursquare. Now, to go back to your initial question, like, I do think there's a critical mass of people. I just keep saying critical mass, it's such a dumb word.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people. I can't tell you the number of people, like, when I fly out here and I sit in the plane, and they're like, hey, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I work at Foursquare. Like, oh, yeah, you check in and you become the mayor of the coffee shop. And I'm like, that is one of 50 things that the company does, and I'm sorry that is the one thing that's stuck in your head. How do I get you to change that? But if we could, as we start to roll out new products, as we start to change people's perception of like what we can do, what the company can do, and what's actually possible and local, I think that's where things really start to get interesting for us. And I can feel that already with like the investor ecosystem, with the press ecosystem. Like people are starting to understand what we're doing. There's a lot of people like, what are these guys up to? These guys are still around. They can't just be doing the check-in thing. What are they building? And I think when people lean in a little bit and they start to ask questions and they listen to the story that we're telling, they realize like, oh my God, these guys have a lot. They have 6 billion check-in data points. They've got 60 million places. They've got 60 million custom geofences around these places, and they can do really interesting stuff with that data. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that from us later this summer, later on this year, going into next year.
So those geofences are kind of little maps of a venue, and it's not like the 4 walls of a building. It's sort of this amorphous space that like people associate. Like if you're in this range, you're probably in the coffee shop or headed towards the coffee shop, or
yeah, like what I mean, you can get into like, it gets really like nerdy and technical really quickly, but
I've also heard you call them polygons.
Right? Yeah, well, it's like custom polygons, custom geofences. Like here, the easiest way to describe it is like everyone here uses Google Maps. Like we all know what Maps looks like because we use Maps all the time, right? And Google Maps is a version of a map that humans use, and it has like the shapes of buildings because that's what humans see. We see the shapes of buildings. Like the maps that Foursquare creates, like they're not meant to be used by humans. They're meant to be read by the sensors in your phone. And so I can tell you the shape of this place. And I can tell you the shape of this place based upon the cell towers, the Wi-Fi signature, the fact that it's a little bit underground, that this might be made of concrete, there might be a glass building over there. Like I know how every single unique phone with a unique version of an OS, a mobile OS, is going to see this particular building. And that's one of the things that makes the Foursquare data set really, really special and really powerful, is that we have that map of the world. Like I've shown it on slides before, and people look at it and it's like, this doesn't make any sense, it's junk. And I'm like, well, it doesn't make sense to us, but it makes perfect sense to all the sensors that we carry in our pockets. And that's the thing that we've been building over the last 5 years, and that's the thing that enables us to do these really interesting things on the Pebble, to do the really interesting stuff in Swarm, to do the really interesting things with the real-time notifications. And that's just what we've been focused on. We've gotten really good at making those maps.
So this week is Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference, and there was a lot of buzz headed up to it that we were going to hear a lot about location, specifically this new technology using Bluetooth radio sensors and devices called iBeacons to really pinpoint exactly where you are. To a lot of people's surprise, we actually didn't hear anything about that in the keynote. Does Bluetooth?
I thought you were going to tell me there was a big thing, and I was like, okay, I didn't even see that. Okay.
I
was paying attention to it too.
Yeah, it was the proverbial elephant in the room. Why is no one talking about it?
I thought the watch was the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Okay. Where is? Do you know, Dennis? Is that the iWatch? Is that what you're wearing right now?
No, this is a Nuka watch.
Oh, okay.
No technology.
I was hoping.
No technology.
Are we not hearing about Bluetooth because it's not ready for prime time? If iBeacon comes to fruition, does that threaten what Foursquare is
I think the iBeacon stuff is really interesting, but like a lot of these technologies, like they're interesting once every single venue has it, every single place has it. Like a lot of the payment technologies, like they're awesome if every single place in the world uses it, but like you got like some of the new payment systems are in 10% of places, and it's segmented across across 8 different vendors, and this is why like a lot of the wallet stuff that's come out in a while just hasn't really taken off. And I think it's the same thing with the iBeacons, right? And so there's like a whole bunch of different beacon vendors, and they all speak a different language, and they're only installed in a handful of phones, so it doesn't work really consistently. And when we talk to local merchants, like one of the things that we do with Foursquare a lot is we go out to merchants and we ask them, like how can Foursquare make your life easier? And what they want to do is they want to drive customers into the store. Like they're not interested in running ad campaigns, and they're not it's just not the language that they speak. They're like, I run a pizza shop, I run this restaurant, I need to fill the seats on a Tuesday. How can you help me do that? And like we have a lot of great answers for that. But these are the people that there's a bunch of vendors asking like, hey, I got you this little thing. Can you climb up on the ladder and put it on the corner of your place every 150 meters? Like installing hardware in there, it's just not like that's just going to happen anytime soon.
Or even in a small store, like, hey, do you have an extra power plug? And they're like,
put the power plug here, put it up here, make sure it's not behind a piece of concrete. Like, don't worry about it. Here's a 8-page manual about how to install iBeacons to make sure that your your mom and pop store is properly covered. Like, I just don't think that's reality right now. Like, a lot of the stuff that we're doing, it's like, how do you, like what I'm talking about with the geofences and the custom polygons and the stop detection that we're doing on the devices. Like, we think about, like, how do we basically do what iBeacon's doing, but do it where you don't have to ask people to put stuff in their stores. Like, you don't have to install anything. That you don't have to talk to the, like, you don't have to you don't have to ship something, you don't have to plug it in, you don't have to install it. It just kind of works everywhere all at once because Foursquare has gotten smart enough to understand, like, when a phone has walked into a place and when a phone has walked out of a place. And, like, we feel very satisfied with the performance and the accuracy with a lot of the stuff that we built. And so, like, I'm just not super bullish on the hardware solutions to a lot of this because, like, hardware seems to create more problems than it solves sometimes. And like, we're able to do it in a way that just kind of works with the phones that we have in our pockets.
Right on. I want to get quick thoughts from you. You build apps for both iOS and Android for Apple and Google's platforms.
Yep.
What do you think of those two platforms, the relative health? Do you feel comfortable as a developer, especially one, you're in a unique position because you're kind of competing with them to build this location layer?
Yeah, it's interesting.
And then we'll take audience questions.
Yeah, we remove a lot of, like, the partnership discussions that we have with these folks from, like, just our ability to build great apps. Like, as a company, we're most focused on, like, let's build stuff that people love. Let's make it fast. Let's make it easier to use. Easier and faster and lighter. Like, that's kind of the mantra that we've been saying internally for a while. And so I think it's great that there's just, like, the iOS toolkit has gotten significantly more mature, even just in the last couple of days with a lot of the announcements. Google's been doing the same with Android. And I think Google and Apple are in a little bit of an arms race to get their, to get the development platform as amazing as it can be in the shortest amount of time. And I think that benefits everyone in this room. It certainly benefits us. And there's things that you can do on phones now that you couldn't do a year ago, you couldn't do 2 years ago. And I think that's because of the arms race that those guys happen to be in. I think everyone kind of wins with that. Like, that said, going back to what I said, like, earlier in this talk, like, there's things that there's things that we're doing with Foursquare that we can only do because we've built a layer on top of Android and a layer on top of iOS that, like, takes advantage of the sensors in different ways. That, combined with the stuff that Apple keeps improving and the stuff that Google and Android keep improving, makes our software better, makes it more accurate, makes it faster, makes the battery drain less, makes the GPS accuracy a little bit better. So, like, we get to work with those guys to improve our stuff. But we are the company that we are, and we can do the things that we're doing specifically because we've built our own custom layer on a lot of that.
So ultimately, you view your role as kind of a layer above those OS layers.
Yeah, I mean, we don't play favorites with those guys. It's like, hey, like, we want to build something awesome for iOS because a lot of our users are on iOS, and we want to build something awesome for Android because a lot of our users are on Android. And if we build something for one platform and not build it for the other, like, the users call us out on it. We don't want the users to be upset. Like, we want people to be excited about what we're doing. So we try to do a lot of things in parity too.
Right on. I think we're going to go to questions now.
Sure.
What we're going to do, and I believe we've got some microphones floating around, and I'm going to alternate between questions from the audience here and questions from the audience on Twitter. So I think
is the audience on Twitter the audience here?
Sometimes
or
people,
are we streaming it? That was the
sometimes
question.
We're not streaming it.
Okay.
So
yes.
But people actually follow along with the live tweets.
Yeah.
That's sort of how they enjoy it remotely. Let's see. I think we've got a question
is pretty
up
sleepy.
front. Yeah, she's she'll have a question later.
Okay.
Hi.
Yes, up front.
Yeah, my name's Rich Reeder. I'm with the Tedeschi Family Winery in Calistoga. I want to know if stop detections are helping businesses in a practical way do real-time engagement.
Yeah, that's kind of the, did everyone hear the question? The question was whether, like, stop detection and our ability to detect or understand, hey, is a person in a store, do they walk out of a store? Like, is that helping local merchants today? And, like, that's part of the big, like, that's one of the things I'm most excited about with Foursquare. It's, like, one of the reasons that we started the company. It's like, how do you help a lot of these local merchants? Like, all the businesses that we frequent in New York, like all the businesses in my hometown in Massachusetts, like, how do you empower them to attract more customers and to succeed? And we're certainly on our way to doing that. I think that we're providing value to millions of merchants around the world, although I can't help but to look at it as, like, there's so much more that we could be doing, in order to help. Like, imagine that I'll go back to, I'll think of a New York example, but imagine you're a brand new awesome sandwich place that opened up right around the Foursquare neighborhood. We should be able to help that business attract a whole bunch of Foursquare users that go to a whole bunch of other sandwich shops in their neighborhood and convince them to at least try this place once. And if they like the place, they can stay there. The merchant can offer a deal or a discount. They can have a relationship with them. But we should definitely be able to help merchants increase their awareness with customers, and then also measure how effective our efforts have been. And we're definitely on our way of doing that. I think we've made great progress over the last couple of years, and I think the most interesting stuff will come from a lot of the things I've been talking about here, the geofencing, the stop detection, some of the background awareness of these things, and I think merchants will take advantage of that.
All right, we'll do a few more audience questions.
Quiet group today.
There we go. And just wait a second for the microphone.
What are your non-vanity metric KPIs?
What are my non-vanity metric KPIs?
That's a lot of buzzwords in one question.
Give me what would be an appropriate answer to that?
What are the numbers you look at every day?
Oh, in terms of numbers, or more ephemeral things? Actual numbers. We look at the number of search queries. We look at the number of people that are opening the app on a regular basis. We look at the number of sessions that we open per week. We look at how active merchants are. There's dashboards that have 50, 60 of these numbers. There are different teams are tracking different things. Some of the overall stuff that we measure is just monthly active users, weekly active users. Those are the things that are important to us, and then the breakdown of what actually people are doing within the app. It's interesting now that we're kind of working in this we're working in this 2-app ecosystem, but really it's 3 apps because we have the existing Foursquare 7. Foursquare 7 is the app that's in the store because it's 7.0. And we have 3 sets of metrics that we're working on, so it's kind of a little bit of a work in progress. But we can imagine that stuff changing as both of those apps roll out. Now, without going into a lot of the details into what the new Foursquare app does, we'll have a lot more. It's going to require us to be paying attention to new things and kind of tracking different metrics as those products evolve.
All right, and then Stephanie, if you can give Wendy the mic for a question from Twitter.
Can I? Let me answer that question the way that what I thought you were going to say is not what I thought you were going to say, but the way I understood it initially was kind of the more wishy-washy, ephemeral way of how we measure success. And I always measure it by when I tell people that I work at Foursquare, what is their response? And this has changed a lot over the last couple of years. It used to, I use that example of the person I sat next to on the plane, and that's the worst scenario. But a lot of times oh, that's the thing that oh, that's the thing where I check in, I know where my friends are. I'm kinda. Oh, that's the thing that gives me that gives me deals and discounts on the places that I go to. I'm yes, getting closer. And so I measure our success in a lot of ways. This is not a real metric, but having conversations with strangers in the street or at a coffee shop, or if I see someone that's using Foursquare at a bar, I'll be oh, what's that app? What does it do? Oh, really? Tell me about it. And I want to hear how they explain it to me. And if they get it the way that we want them to get it, I feel satisfied. And a lot of times they tell a completely different story, which means that we still have a lot of work to do. It's a good trick, by the way.
Right on. And a question from Twitter from via my colleague Wendy.
Yep. So Amity Gay asks, what tools will you use to intro Foursquare to new users and convince disenchanted users to come back? PR, ads, stunts?
Stunts? What kind of stunts? I'm going to ride a motorcycle through a ring of fire in Times Square. Yeah.
Wendy's just retweeting the question.
No, I was I'm interested in these stunt ideas. No, there's a lot of different things that we can do. Specifically about how do you teach users about what Foursquare is, what we're trying to do with the apps. And I think the best way to teach people what the app is for is the app should be simple. It's very difficult for me to put Swarm in front of someone at a coffee shop and be what do you think this app is for? And for them to not see oh, it shows me where my friends are, I can broadcast what I'm doing in the future, and I can see what my friends are doing in other cities. I'm okay, you kind of got that. When we test the new Foursquare app, we call it Batman internally, and we test it, with people. It's like, what is this app for? And they're like, oh, well, this is for local search and recommendations. And I can see that these things are personalized. Like, that's what we want to get out of that. Now, I don't think we have that in our existing app. I think it's a little bit of a mix of a whole bunch of stories. So I think the first step is just having an app that tells its own story. It tells it in a very clear and concise way. And I think once we have that, then we can start to amplify that with whether it's email marketing, whether we do a marketing campaign, whether we put some spend behind it. There's very efficient ways to reach existing users, lapsed users, potential users on a wide variety of social channels. So we think a lot about what we're going to do, particularly when the time is right.
All right. Let's see. I think we've got a question over here. Sorry, Laura's going to bring you the microphone.
Longtime Foursquare user, big fan.
Thank you.
I've been using Swarm, still trying to fall in love with it, to be perfectly frank.
Would love your feedback.
And I guess and your comment goes to the heart of my question. So I hear you talk a lot about people describing Foursquare to you,
Yeah.
right, which I think is great. But I wonder how you balance how people have co-opted the apps to their own use cases
Yep.
and the things that they've fallen in love with the things that you want them to do.
Yeah,
Right.
give me an
I think that this gentleman is referring to the fact that I systematically go through Swarm and heart every single one of my friends' check-ins because I'm annoying.
Is that the issue that you...
That's actually exactly the use case I was thinking of. No, but I mean, you start out with like points and mayorships and and that kind of stuff, right? Like you were like poster child for gamification.
Yeah.
And now you're personalized recommendations. But there's also this Swarm thing that we're all trying to figure out, and then like Batman that's coming down the pike, right?
Yeah.
And it's all a lot of cool stuff, and like I still love what you guys are doing.
Yeah.
But some of us have fallen in love with pieces of the original
Yeah,
Foursquare.
it's a good question. It's actually probably one of the most interesting questions. Because like this goes back to like grad school, but like one of the classic rules of social software is you build something for one purpose as the creator, and then once you unleash it in the world, like people will use it for whatever they want to. And the gamification stuff that we built in very early was it was never meant to be a game. Like we weren't trying to make like a version of Super Mario that you'd play in the real world. Like we use that as like an analogy to explain it sometimes, but like that was never the intention. The intention was always like, let's make utilities that are long lasting, that provide people with like a better way to experience the real world, and let's do it in a way that makes them playful. Like local search should be playful. It should like tease you and push and pull you and kind of flirt with you a little bit. Like that's what we always wanted to do. And like old Foursquare mechanics did a little bit of that, but I think it got stale over a while. And I think we saw people that abused it and cheated and fake check-ins, and this is stuff that we, in 2009, 2010, we spent a lot of time correcting. And now when we look at what we're trying to do as a company in 2014, it's like we want to make, it's the same mission, same vision. It's like make these tools that help people have a better understanding of the real world, but at the same time make them playful. And so like that means like removing some of the winner and loser aspect of some of this and just making it so like the users can play and kind of push and pull and maybe flirt with other users and back against the app. And I still think we have some work to do there with Swarm. I think what we put out is like a really good like first really solid first pass at it, but like we look at some of the things that we put in there and we know we need to fix some of it. And if you go back to the early days of Foursquare, like when we launched that stuff in like March of 2009, like we iterated it over the course of a year. Like this is what you do as like a creator of one of these systems. Like you tweak the levers and you kind of like keep designing things and change the copy until it feels just right. And so we're like 3 weeks into that process, so I would expect to see a big evolution of that. But I definitely I do not want to lose that playful and kind of fun spirit. And I think we've done an okay job keeping that within Swarm, and I think there's a lot of things we can do to expand on that. And I want to extend that same stuff to Foursquare as well. But I think one of the things that was holding us back for a while is this idea of like, gosh, people just think of us for badges. I guess we're just making badges all the time. And like, there's so much more that we can do as a company. And sometimes we just say, hey, this is what we want to do, and this is the story that we want to tell. And so we're going to make some changes to the app to reflect that. So expect to see a lot of changes coming in the Foursquare app, some of which will speak to some of the things that I think that you're talking about, and expect to see us tweak Swarm a whole bunch in the next, the next couple weeks, couple months.
I was so proud of getting the gym rat badge that I wrote about it in the New York Times.
Yeah,
And-
but when did you write about it in the New York Times?
That would have been very early, I think 2011.
Okay, that sounds
Yeah.
about right. Yeah.
That, badges were a thing back then.
Yeah.
Let's see, I believe we're going to go back to a Twitter question and then, actually we'll go to Joe in the front row,
Hi.
Hi.
the foosball player.
Yes, that never happened.
We'll play the match after.
I'm
after
looking forward to it.
After the chat.
Did you always know you were building a data business?
Did we always know that we were building a data business? We never even thought that we were building a business, to be honest. In 2009, 2010, it was like Naveen and I sitting around our kitchen table trying to build something that replaced the app that Google was about to kill, which is Dodgeball. And it's like, let's reproduce that functionality because that's what all of our friends use in New York, and if it goes away, what are we going to do on Saturday? But that being said, I'll tell you what, if you go back to like the Google days, there was like a specific aha moment that we had when we were, this is when Dodgeball was still on like MySQL, and I would run queries in the database that would say, okay, I live in the East Village in New York. I was like, show me all the places in the East Village that my friends, that people check into on Saturdays between 11 o'clock and 2 o'clock in the afternoon, sort them by popularity, remove the ones that I've already been to, and then show me that list. And that's a really long, nasty SQL statement that back in 2005 used to take like 40 seconds to run. But what you would get is like, those are a list of the brunch places that I should go to in my neighborhood. And I was like, this is just a really nasty data set. Like there's really cool stuff you can do with this. Like we have to find a way to give this to, at that time it's like all of our friends, or give it to 1,000 people or 100,000 people. And like that's what we do every single day at Foursquare. Like we're basically solving that problem, but for any type of place, any type of neighborhood all throughout the world with 6 billion check-ins in 60 million places. And like when we started in 2009, we never expected to be like a data business, but we knew that like getting a critical mass of check-ins was the key to doing that. And to your point, like using game mechanics in the early days was part of the way to get to all of that check-in data so that we could do all the things that we wanted to do. If you pulled me aside in 2009, you're like, hey, you're gonna have 160 employees working on this thing, there's gonna be 50 million people that signed up for it. I'd be like, there's no freaking way. That's just not what we were thinking about at the time. But we built this stuff, it worked really well, people love it, people continue to use it, and I think the best stuff that we're about to roll, like the best stuff that Foursquare will ever do is the stuff that you'll see later this year. And that goes back to the things that we were thinking about at NYU, the stuff that we were like flirting with at Dodgeball and the reason that we started Foursquare. And it just takes a really long time to tease it out of the company. People always talk about, this job and building companies in general. It's like, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And like we are like the poster child for that. Like we're 5 years into it, and only now are the phones good enough. Only now is the data set good enough. Only now like is there a big enough audience that we can tell this story to. And we get to do it in a way that like no one else does. Like it's awesome.
Right on. And then I do want to take another question from Twitter, if Wendy, if you could.
So I'm now channeling Ken Young. So how do you view the unbundled Foursquare stack up against Yelp, Highlight, and other location services?
Good question.
So the unbundled stack is basically Foursquare and Swarm.
Yeah, like I always thought old Foursquare, I only call it Foursquare 7, the one that's in the App Store, like it was meant to be the be-all, end-all app. It's like, oh, it's the thing that lets you know where your friends are. It's the thing that helps you find great places. And I think one of the things, like one of the trends that you're seeing in unbundling in general, it's like, and this is the reason that you've got Facebook and Google and Dropbox and all these other people like that are unbundling their apps. It's like the simpler, easiest, fastest, lightest apps. Those are the ones that win. And so remember, we have these 2 use cases that have been on top of Foursquare since the beginning of time. Like check in and all of your friends know where you are all the time. And every time you check in, Foursquare gets smarter about the places that you go to. And like in my head, those stories make perfect sense together. But when you talk to 50 million people, they're like, well, I want this, and I don't necessarily want this. Or I want this, but I don't have an interest in this. And so it was very I wouldn't say it's very natural, but once we decided to make that decision to split the two into pieces, it's like, oh my gosh, this makes so much sense. It's so much easier internally for the teams to focus. It's so much easier to prioritize. It's so much easier to come up with marketing copy. It's so much easier to talk to you guys about it. And in terms of going back to that question, like how do we see ourselves in that stack? Like I think that I think that Swarm can be, the best app for keeping up and meeting up with your friends. Like we have a shot at building the best app that's ever been made for doing that. And I think we do that a lot better than any app that's out there. And when it comes to, local search, like I think we have a shot at being the best local search product that's ever existed. And it's not just by improving on what Yelp's doing or improving on what Google's doing. It's like, let's reinvent local search in general. Let's make this thing get smart based upon where you've been. Let's personalize every single thing in it. And let's give people this really proactive way of understanding the world. And I think I think we're doing great stuff.
Right on. Let's see. I see lots of hands up. I'm going to go back there. If you can wait for the microphone so that we can get the question.
My question's a bit more sort of global focused, actually. Have you noticed any trends between different continents? So, the way we use it as Europeans versus the way North Americans use it?
Yeah, that's a really good question, too. I'll tell you, one of the surprising things is that people are kind of the same all around the world. Like the average, the average super engaged Foursquare user will give us like 2 to 3 check-ins per day, and it's usually either like, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or lunch, coffee, and drinks, or it's one combination of that. Of course, in different countries, you see that people are on a different schedule, so that's interesting. But I was surprised to learn like how similar the usage is around the world. A couple caveats there is that Foursquare sees explosive growth outside of the U.S. Like countries depending on what month you ask me in, it's like a different country. But particularly right now and for the last 6 or 8 months, like Turkey, Russia, Brazil. Like Brazil is just like, it's insane. Like we have to redo the stats so that like the numbers fit on the charts. And a lot of this is because like, hey, people just got their first smartphones. Hey, people really like social media. Hey, like the existing local products down here are kind of lousy, like no one, like the street addresses are all wrong, and it turns out Foursquare is really good because it's all crowdsourced. And in these areas that aren't super well mapped out or super well defined by some of these existing mapping products, like Foursquare is like the default app that people use, and it's amazing to see. So like even though the usage might be similar in like the way in which people use the some of the products, like the scale in which it's being used in different countries varies widely, and it's really crazy to see it take off in some of these other countries. Especially, it's like I don't know anyone in Brazil. Like how do we get all these people there? And it's just this thing that just kind of organically grows. It's really a cool feeling.
Right on. Let's see. I think we'll go with one more question from Twitter, and then one question from the back of the audience there. And,
this is great, by the way. The
yeah,
Q&A is really good.
We're going long because we're getting great questions. So thank you.
If they were lousy, you'd cut it off?
I would cut it off,
right. Don't screw it up.
Just like those mayors, I think you need to, just guillotine them, get those crowns off their head.
We changed the mayor game. Remember, we made it more about competing with friends than competing with strangers.
Oh, okay. So. Well, then it's even better because I like to annoy my friends.
Oh, see, there you go. See, we improved it.
Yeah. Wendy, what's Twitter asking?
Twitter is asking, Steve is curious if Foursquare check-in popularity reflects actual retail brick-and-mortar business success. Is it a good barometer?
It can be used as a barometer. I'm not sure how I'm not sure how accurate it is, depending on like who you're asking. But like we've definitely had people approach us and say like, hey, I'd love to know, like this is like these articles I've like run in newspapers and stuff in the past where it's like, I want to know, are people shopping more at Target or at Best Buy this year? And are the Best Buy numbers up more this year than they were last year? Like we have all sorts of people that try to dig into the data to pull out trends. And I think this is one of the really cool things that you can do with Foursquare data. Like we've had a whole bunch of urban planners, for example, be like, well, if we're going to put, something in this neighborhood, like, can you go through the search history and tell us what people search for around here where the nearest result is more than a mile away? And it's like, gosh, that's a really cool query. And maybe that affects the way that people are actually building cities and planning, in planning some of these urban or suburban environments. And that stuff's really interesting. We've heard, there's like hedge funds, like they go out and they'll have people that will go and like count the cars in like a Target versus a Walmart and try to trade off that data. And like I imagine there's a world in which you could do that with Foursquare data, but I'm not sure how, is that something that's super successful? Is that something that we do? Like that's a question for another time, I think.
Right on. And then I think we had our last question back there, and Laura's bringing you a microphone.
Hey.
I was hoping we could talk a little bit about privacy and security. You talked earlier that you said that your ultimate goal is to basically know where everyone is at any given point in time. And for me, that makes me very uncomfortable. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the privacy concerns of that, and also, ultimately, why should we trust Foursquare?
Yeah, those are great questions. I think our approach on this has always been like be super transparent with the users about the data that we're collecting, and then give them complete control over the data. So if they are like, hey, I think Foursquare has a lot of information on me, that they can go at any time and say, I want to delete this check-in at this, at this certain place. I want to delete all my check-ins in this particular city. I don't know if you're a Swarm user, but you'll notice, like I think Swarm the app is better when people opt into neighborhood sharing. And when you sign up for the app, we teach you like, hey, as part of the onboarding process, this is how you turn it on, and this is how you turn it off. And we made the conscious decision that we would not let people sign up for the app until we made them drag that on and drag that off so they could learn how to do it. Like that seemed like the responsible thing to do as the creators of the system. So we take that stuff very, very seriously. To your question, it's like, why should you trust Foursquare? That's a tricky question. Like I think that it's a tricky question. I don't think I have a really good answer for it. Like I think that hey, we're honest people trying to build this company that we're really excited about and to build these products that we've dreamed about for 10 years. And I think we've been very thoughtful and we've been very transparent with the community about what we're doing and what works and what doesn't work, and this is what you do. And I think we do a really good job of that. I think we have a great support team. I think we're very thoughtful in our support documentation and like helping people online. But I think it raises another good question of hey, there's this version of a local search tool that just kind of understands where I've been. Am I cool with that? Now, I think that there will be some subset of people that won't be okay with that. And I think we're okay with that because we realize that we're pushing the boundaries of what's been done or what's possible on mobile phones, and certainly what's been done before in this space. And I think that's part of being an entrepreneur in a technology company is doing things that haven't been done before, even if it makes some people it makes them think twice about oh, what are these guys doing, and is this for good, or does this thing make my life better? Ultimately, I want all of the things that we're doing and all the data that we're gathering from users. I want that to go into this system that makes everyone's that makes your experience of San Francisco better, that makes your experience of New York better, that makes your, when you go on a trip to Paris or something, it makes your experience of Paris better because we know where you are and we know where you've been and we can help you find things that you wouldn't normally have found. I think there'll always be people that are oh, you guys are just trying to collect all the data in the world. And I'm yeah, I mean, we are collecting a lot of information about the types of places that people have been to, but our intent is to be able to make these magical pieces of software that teach you about the world. That's always been the intent, and that's going to continue to be the intent. And so I really hope that we get to continue to have the opportunity to build these great things. And we've had the opportunity so far because I think we've earned the trust and the goodwill of a lot of people, 50 million people that have signed up. Hey, I want to be a part of this. I want to see what you guys are doing. I want to see what you guys can build for me. And I think we're doing a pretty good job at it. If anyone here ever gets an idea that we're not doing a good job at that, or you think that we're doing something that we shouldn't, I hope that you call us out on it. One of the things that's really important to me is that people think highly of what we're doing, and they don't think that we're shifty, and that they think that we have good intentions. Because I think that's the type of company that we've been trying to build. This stuff sounds corny, I know it does, but I know this is going back to your question. We didn't get into this game to start this big business. We got into this game because there was things that we wanted to build in the world that didn't exist, and so we went and built them. And then 5 years, you look back and you're holy shit, we've built this giant company that does all this amazing stuff. And like the things that are important to us are building out that vision and like being able to introduce these products. So like if we ever do that, if we ever step over the line, if people ever think that like we're doing something we shouldn't, like I hope you guys call us out on it, because I really would love to like respond to it.
Right on. That's all the time we have. Thank you so much to Dennis Crowley.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
For the time.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, absolutely. One thought.
So the last thing, whenever I talk to audiences, and thank you guys for being like a really great audience and asking really great questions. This is great. And I'm serious about like the calling us out on stuff that you don't like. Like I really take that. Your feedback and your opinions are super valuable to me, and valuable to the company. And we take that stuff very seriously. But I always assign like homework, right? I think there's so many people that just think of us still as just the check-in company. And so your homework for the next week or 2 weeks or forever is, if you use existing local search products, like try to go into Foursquare, the existing Foursquare app, the one you see in the store, and use that as a replacement. Use it for a week, use it for 2 weeks, use it until you get sick of it, and then let me know what you think of it. Like, you can tweet me, I'm just at Dens or dens@foursquare.com. I'd love to hear your feedback. Like, does it work for you? Does it not work for you? Is it like, or do we give good results? Are you super impressed or you're not? Like, I'd love to hear that feedback, because I think that we're doing stuff that hasn't been done before, and I think we can do it in a way that really makes like the real world more interesting for people, and to make cities easier to use, like all this stuff that we're talking about. Like I really believe that. I feel very satisfied with it. So I'd love for you guys to play around with it, especially if it's like something you haven't done in the app before, and then let me know what you think. And I'd love to share it with our team too. So thank you for doing that, and thanks for having me.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and 2 quick notes. This audience has raised more than $1,600 for Girls Who Code, a great nonprofit we're very proud to support, the ReadWriteMix. So thank you very much. And we will be back in August with Mike McHugh of Flipboard. If you go to the ReadWrite website and look for our events page, you'll get all the details. We hope to see you back in August. Thanks very much again to Dennis, and thanks to all of you.
Great. Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Cheers.